everyone. I'm super excited to be here. You can't see it, but I'm also a bit nervous. I'm not a public speaker, if you can imagine it. I am actually a very timid person. I like to work on policy. But nothing gets me more fired up than seeing faces like yours, speaking to groups like yours about the impact of your voices at the federal level, at the local level, and I just know that we can together make a difference. Especially now these days when the sky feels like it's falling, I think it's important to ground ourselves. So I want to acknowledge that some of the things I'm going to share might make you uncomfortable, might make you tense up, might make you experience trauma. And I just want to acknowledge that that's okay. Those are very valid feelings. You can always walk out, you can always come back in, whatever is comfortable for you. I'm going to ask you to plant your feet firmly on the ground. Sit as comfortably as you can. Notice your body. Notice your breath. Look around you. Look to your neighbors. You're among friends. Look to one of your neighbors and just make eye contact for a second. Nod. We're all here because we believe in a more just world. And I know it's hard because right now things seem really hard. But we've gone through hard things before. We've persevered, and we're not coming at this alone. We have networks, we've established relationships, we've built communities, we've built coalitions. All of that is empowering. And so I just want to make sure that you know that you belong. You belong here. You belong in this space, and your voice deserves to be heard. We're going to be talking a little bit about national immigration policies. But we really can't start without a little bit of framing about why the denomination, the Lutheran denomination, even has a voice in all of this. So I thought I'd just preview a little bit about the ELCA itself. So I live and work in Washington, D.C., where we work on public policy informed by Lutheran ministries, congregations, and programs. We're grounded in Scripture, what Scripture has to say about feeding the poor, making sure that the prisoner is visited, welcoming the stranger, all of those things. And we get to interact with the federal government, usually members of Congress, the administration, the agencies, and we do that to better our world, to work towards the common good. We have a strategy called Amparo, which stands for Accompanying Migrants with Protection, Advocacy, Representation, and Opportunities. Amparo is a word that means to protect a living thing from harm in Spanish. It is also derived from Psalm 46, which some of you may know, God is my refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Through Amparo, the ELCA is committed to working to uphold the rights of migrants, to address the drivers that are pushing people out of their homes, and to work towards more just and humane policies, as well as to engage across all of the denomination, our church partners and allies, to address the situation of migration and to holistically support people. Our work encompasses areas like advocacy, so talking to, again, the administration, change makers. It also involves awareness raising, so putting out education to our networks about what's happening nationally, what's happening internationally, what people can do. We have a network of welcoming congregations and synods, and we also have a network of bishops that are involved in advocacy. We also work in integral accompaniment because a big focus of what Amparo is making sure that people have opportunities in their home countries so that they don't need to migrate. So a big part of that is making sure that people have opportunities at home, as well as helping them when they are deported or returned. Because as you can imagine, someone's story doesn't just end when they're brought on a plane back to their home country. They are a full person with full potential, And with a little bit of help, they're able to restart and rekindle their lives' passions and get back on their feet. So that's a little bit about what we do. And this whole integrated response is what really shapes and informs the work that we do on Capitol Hill. We're informed by these programs, scriptures, ministries, and strategies to go to Congress and to be able to respond to things like the executive orders that we've seen come out most recently. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the executive orders, mainly focusing on 10 of them that relate to immigration. And if you'd like, I can share this presentation afterwards so you can have it on hand. Hearing affirmations for that? Yep, great. These 10 executive orders touch on all of us, touch all of our lives. Yes, they are about immigration and refugees and trade and terrorism and safety and all these other things. They touch our own lives. And we're going to discuss why it is that these are so important. I'll mention first the executive order on protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. Perhaps you've heard of this. It's the attempt by the administration to redefine who is a U.S. citizen in this country. Birthright citizenship is something that has been enshrined in the Constitution since the 14th Amendment was adopted. And even though there are attempts to deny U.S. citizenship now to people who are if the child's parents are undocumented, or if a parent is a temporary visa holder, we know that this can't stand. The 14th Amendment protects U.S. citizenship for anyone who is born in the United States. And as recently as last week, a federal court agreed. A federal judge temporarily blocked the executive order on redefining American citizenship. What kind of implications does this have for our nation that we're thinking of changing who is a U.S. citizen based on legal arguments that have already gone through the courts? There are other immigration orders that are really important to know about as well. Protecting the American people against invasion. What it is. Specifically, it is a wide-ranging executive order covering everything from new immigration enforcement priorities. It also expands the use of what's known as expedited removal nationwide, i.e. fast-track deportation. It calls for the registration of undocumented immigrants, including criminal penalties for people who fail to do so. And it calls for stronger state collaboration through the use of what is known as 287G agreements. Agreements that local jurisdictions sign with federal government in order to agree to collaborate on immigration enforcement. Notably, it also signals that it will in the future restrict humanitarian parole programs and restrict temporary protected status programs, which we know temporary protected status benefits over 2 million people in this country who have come from war-torn countries that have experienced climate disasters or experiencing social and civil strife. It also directs a review of all federal funding going to migrant-serving non-governmental organizations to ensure that those funds are not being used improperly. It also threatens federal funds to what are so-called sanctuary jurisdictions. And at this point, it's probably worth mentioning that we have two different understandings of sanctuary. Sanctuary in the sense of churches and places of worship that offer sanctuary to people, and sanctuary jurisdictions, which include cities and other localities. There is no legal definition of sanctuary jurisdiction. So most likely, when the federal government tries to apply this, it will have to issue policy guidance to see how it interprets sanctuary jurisdiction. This order has wide scope, and we don't know yet what its full potential will be. But it's clear that these aggressive measures have inflicted fear in our communities and will sweep up people in this larger dragnet of enforcement action, people who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Including, we also have probably some migrant-supporting organizations in the room who will be implicated by this executive order and could become targets. Focusing now on the executive orders to secure our borders, declaring a national emergency, guaranteeing the state's protection against invasion, in clarifying the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States. What these executive orders do is seek to establish essentially complete operational control of the border by effectively eliminating all access to asylum, making what is known as Remain in Mexico the only alternative to vulnerable people in the border, suspending the use of the CBP-1 app, which has allowed migrants to seek an appointment to come to a port of entry to seek asylum, and ending the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan parole programs, which has enabled people with sponsors to come directly to the United States in order to request protection, so they don't have to come to the border. They can get a sponsor from the United States and fly in with permission. The declaration of a national emergency also has allowed the mobilization of the military and military resources for immigration enforcement and border operations. It further limits humanitarian protection for asylum from those who are so-called engaged in invasion, and it makes no exception for unaccompanied children. Border crossings, at least in the last 2 months, have been at their lowest since the mid-2020s when President Trump was in office. All this order will do is compound the use of force against vulnerable people at the border. More people will become at risk if they're forced to wait in Mexico for their court hearings through the Remain in Mexico program. And as you can see, there is little to no access to asylum at the moment. Last Friday night, I am glued to my phone, as one is, and the sky starts falling again. The executive order realigning the United States Refugee Admissions Program had effectively ended the permanent resettlement pathway available for refugees to come to the United States. We don't have a refugee resettlement program right now. This has impacted the resettlement agencies who help bring in people that have already been rigorously vetted, who've been waiting for years abroad for permanent resettlement in the United States. It's also affected Welcome Corps, which you might have heard about. Welcome Corps is a program that has enabled groups of US citizens to band together and privately sponsor refugees. So not only have we said we're shutting down operations for resettlement agencies, we're also going to make sure that US citizens who have been so moved to help with resettlement can't do that either. So Friday night, we get a notice that resettlement agencies have received a stop work order. I don't know if you know what that means, but essentially it means that all of their operations have been impacted and the resettlement program is in a dire situation. Flights have been canceled. People who had a booked flight to come to the United States are no longer able to take that flight into the United States anymore. Our commitment to these people who have been waiting abroad for so many years, who've gone through so many hoops to quote unquote do it the right way and come and be resettled, we've just destroyed our commitment. People ask me, there's so much going on, it's very overwhelming, how do I stay on top of all of this? It's important to note what has already happened, what has had an immediate impact. The order on nationwide expedited removal is notable in this way. It makes nationwide expedited removal, as I mentioned, fast-track deportation, applicable nationwide. Before, it was only applied within a 100-mile radius of the border to people who had been here under 14 days. Now this order says we're going to expand that nationwide, and it's applicable to anyone who has been here under 2 years. So the onus is on a person, like you, an immigrant, to say, no, I have been here more than 2 years. So many legal service organizations have been emphasizing the need to carry your papers, if you have them, and to have papers establishing your residency for 2 years or more. The order suspending asylum at the border, that one's been notable as well because, as far as I know, people that have been presenting at the border have just been immediately turned back. And you tell me, what happens when somebody's so desperate to seek asylum that, their chances of coming to the port of entry and getting an appointment are gone now? Do you think that the fear that they're facing that's driving them to leave their country of origin, that's driven them all the way to the border, is going to stop? Absolutely not. So, in effect, this order might make border crossings rise as people seek other alternative avenues to come into the United States. Suspending the refugee resettlement program, as I mentioned, has ceased to be, our resettlement program has ceased to be effectively, and it has put in jeopardy thousands of people who are waiting for resettlement. Another one that has been mentioned and in the news lately is the rolling back of the sensitive locations policy. This is something that is a little bit hard to describe, but a few years ago, during the Obama administration, there was a policy issued to ICE agents that said, you know, when you're coming to sensitive locations, here's how you should conduct yourselves. That policy was expanded in 2021 under the Biden administration to what's called as the protected grounds policy. And that policy said hospitals, schools, places of worship, playgrounds, those are protected areas, and you have to conduct yourself in a certain way. Certain immigration activities are prohibited unless there are exigent circumstances and you have a judicial warrant. Effectively, as of the 21st, that policy has been rolled back. The only guidance that ICE and CBP agents have is to, quote unquote, use a healthy dose of common sense. This isn't the only thing that's happening nationally. We've had many executive orders rolled out in just a number of days. We can probably expect to hear more in the coming ones. But Congress has also been busy. In the last week, they passed something called the Lake and Riley Act. Named after a woman who was tragically murdered, this bill requires mandatory detention without a bond hearing for certain immigrants accused of, arrested, or convicted of certain shoplifting crimes. You don't even have to be charged. You could be never charged or convicted, and you could still be swept up in this bill. So it's a huge concern for anyone who has merely been accused of or arrested or taken into custody for alleged shoplifting crimes. Because right now, this Lake and Riley Act, as soon as it is signed by President Biden, will make it so that people who could have just been in the wrong place in the wrong time, or people who have committed shoplifting crimes, no longer have due process protections.
President Trump. Is it President Biden?
Oh, President Trump, yes. So what can you do? No doubt there's a lot that's going through your mind about the executive orders, how you can respond, how you can help people in your community. A cute little acronym that I've come up with is MAP: mobilize, accompany, act, and pray. What are some ways that you can mobilize? You can build robust networks with community-based organizations in your area. Share resources with each other, strategize, and stay alert. That way, we don't feel so isolated, and we're not feeling like we're going at this alone. Some ways of staying alert is to have numbers for hotlines in your phone so that if you see ICE activity in your area, you can alert the rest of the community about their presence. You can also use this time to strengthen internal policies and operations in your own place of worship. Maybe you just need to cover basics of what to do if ICE agents come to your door. What are your rights as a place of worship? Under the 4th and 5th Amendment, places of worship do have rights. So that's something definitely to be worth checking out. You can accompany people. Many people in our communities are experiencing all kinds of trauma and may feel afraid and maybe don't even want to come out and discuss their immigration status with you, right? But you don't need to know someone's immigration status to offer them support. Specifically, you can make resources like Know Your Rights workshops and presentations, pamphlets, and toolkits, such as family preparation plans, available widely to those in your community. I've seen multiple examples of people printing out family preparation plans and posting them on bulletins, or making sure that people have know your rights pamphlets posted somewhere publicly so that people know what their rights are if ICE agents or officers ask them about their immigration status or something like that. If you scan the QR code here, it'll lead you to our website where we have many of these resources available in English, Spanish, Dari, Pashto, Haitian Creole, and other languages that we've compiled from multiple other locations. We're also happy to work with your congregation if you need specific guidance on who to reach out to in your community. Act. You're all here to act. We really desperately need people to be raising their voices locally with their school boards, county officials, local sheriffs, letting them know what their opinions and feelings are about immigration enforcement activity in their communities. And of course, we need you to raise your voice nationally, specifically with your elected representatives, your 2 senators, and your member of Congress. I would mention, for me, some of the bills that you can be looking out for that have a lot to do with the issues we've talked about today are bills like the No Bailout for Sanctuary Cities Act and, as I mentioned, the Lake and Riley Act. Finally, you can pray. I really encourage people to lead sermons, Bible studies, small group prayers around the themes of immigration and welcoming the stranger. It's very hard to change someone's mind from one day to the next, but we can start to socialize these ideas and make sure that people at least have a basic understanding of what the Bible has to say so that we're building conscience around our community. This is going to be a long-term project, friends. We're not going to have these policies flipped one day to the next. We're probably going to have members of our community come to us and have very different opinions or feelings about immigration. It's incumbent on each of us to help raise awareness, to help build conscience, and help lead to some of these policy changes we want to see. Very last, I want to focus on what this all means for you. There is a particular quote from that's attributed to Martin Luther King, which says, "Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase." 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." What does this verse say to you? And you can scribble it on your notes or in your phones. How does this resonate with you, especially around the theme that we heard earlier today about hope and resilience? When we're made to feel afraid, just remember, propaganda thrives in fear. But when we're courageous and brave enough to take that first step, even when we don't know what the final outcome or result will be, that's all it takes. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Friends, I can't tell you what the future will hold. I know it will be very hard. But I know that my God, your God, is with us. Holy Spirit is leading us. God is our refuge, and we'll be okay. We'll get through this together. All right. Well, thank you very much, and